Hi guys, welcome to the second episode of Our Body, the podcast. If you still haven't subscribed, please do. If you haven't watched the first episode, please do. I talk about body image on there, and I appreciate everyone who has watched it and has taken the time to message me privately about it as well, and I hope that you were able to discuss anything that I brought up with other people as well. So yeah, we'll keep it going. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about accepting reality and seeking help and what follows all of that and what kind of emotions, I guess, you would go through in the stage of accepting your reality and accepting the fact that you were sexually traumatized. And there's no shame in accepting your reality. There's no shame in recognizing your trauma because we are far beyond our trauma. So the first thing I want to talk about is this feeling of shock and this idea of just disbelief that you have gone through something like this, that someone has violated your body and has gone and done something without your consent, and also the disbelief that you may not have acted the way you wanted to in that situation. For example, you might be in this state of, how could I not have defended myself? Why did I not do anything? And this disbelief that you as the survivor couldn't do enough, and I'm putting those in inverted quotes, but that you didn't do enough to protect yourself or to prevent it from happening, which is a normal thought to have, but it's not the right thought to have, if that makes sense. So there's that, but then there's also the idea of minimizing your trauma. So aside from thinking, how did this happen, like why did this happen, or I can't believe that this has happened to me, you then start to minimize your trauma in return. And you might start to think, well, at least I didn't do this, or at least this just happened to me. And I suppose in doing so, you kind of dismiss your experience because A, you're dismissing the fact that it happened. B, you're dismissing the extent to which it affected you, mentally, emotionally, physically, and it can become very destructive, especially if you are stuck in this mindset of disbelief and minimization. And sometimes these thoughts don't come from you. It can come from other people as well. Like, you might have confided in someone, and say if you were molested, they might say to you, well, at least it wasn't rape. And it's like, why use that term, at least? Because for me, it seems like, and I had mentioned this in the first episode, where when people think of sexual trauma or sexual abuse, they automatically go to rape and think of the extreme and kind of dismiss everything else that's below that, I guess, or not as extreme. And that's where that phrase comes in, where it's, oh, at least he didn't rape you, or at least he just touched you. And it's like, should I then be grateful for the trauma that I'm going through? Because it's not, in your eyes, it's not as harsh as someone who was raped would be in, which is very unfair, and it doesn't help you as a survivor to fully accept your reality, in the sense that it's not, oh, I was just molested, or I was just raped, or he just grabbed my waist. It's, these things happened to me. The words well, at least, none of these phrases that minimize the impact that has caused you should ever be used in relation to yourself, or as a supporter or like a support system who is then saying that to a survivor. And also I feel that through this minimization and through this disbelief, I guess, it also has ended up in normalizing a lot of forms of sexual assault, because as I said, it's not just rape. For me, at least, the definition is doing something beyond someone's consent. And it doesn't just have to be through penetration, it doesn't just have to be through sex. It could literally be grabbing someone by the arm or grabbing someone by the waist. Yes, now it seems like this has become such a normal thing in society that it would even be stupid to bring it up, and you would be over dramatic to bring it up, but it's still a form of assault because you're still doing something that I haven't consented to. And so I think we need to do a lot better as a society and as listeners to be mindful of the type of language that we use, because once you start to get rid of that language, you'll find that a lot more survivors will have the courage to speak up on their truth, because they won't feel like they're going to be put in a position where they're re-victimized because their situation isn't what you expected it to be. And it's almost as if you don't find me bleeding with my legs looking like this, with my vagina torn up, with me crying, then my experience doesn't matter. Like, I'll be able to get over it. Yeah, I think it has just caused a lot of issues because A, it means a lot of people don't even realise that they've been sexually assaulted. B, when they do, it's like they're almost too embarrassed to bring it up because, like I said, they could be labelled as just being very overdramatic and, oh, you'll get over it, or it like he just grabbed your waist, like, why are you making a big fuss out of it? And it's like, it makes no difference. Trauma is trauma, abuse is abuse, regardless of how small or big you think that form of abuse is, it's still abuse, end of. And I don't want to hear any other discussion beyond that, because there shouldn't be an argument, there shouldn't be a but. It's literally, I was abused, I'm recognising my abuse, and no one in this world has the right to tell me how to feel about my abuse. And I can't feel that way about it as well. You know, I have to also recognise the amount of pain that it's put me in, for me to then process all the other emotions that follow it, and then eventually find the courage and find or be comfortable enough to ask for help, you know? Because you can't begin to heal from trauma you don't recognise. So now let's talk about denial. This again is, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with this whole shock and feeling of disbelief. And it's just denying that it even happened to you. Because if you deny it happened to you, then maybe it will go away. Maybe you won't have the nightmares or the flashbacks, and maybe you'll be able to move on because it didn't happen. This literally is what I went through. I think it was the very first, obviously beyond shock, it was the very first thing I had said to myself after what had happened. I remember going up to my parents' room and just staring at myself in front of the mirror. I didn't even allow myself to cry, didn't even have some kind of breakdown. I literally looked at myself and I said, this didn't happen to me. I'm not going to tell anyone about this. And I had literally vowed that I was going to take this with me to the grave. But by denying your trauma and by assuming that you'll be able to forget about what happened, you leave a lot of issues unresolved, and you'll find that because you've left a lot of issues unresolved, it will start to bring itself out in certain behaviours. You might find that you're highly irritable. You might find that you've gone into a very antisocial state where you don't really want to be around other people. You just want to keep yourself to yourself, and might be things like I had discussed in the previous episode when it comes to body image and the thoughts that you go through with that, but you will find that soon enough it will show itself, because the mind, as smart as it is, I feel like you need to address things when it comes to your struggles, because our mind and our bodies are connected in so many different ways beyond the biological sense. It's like when you're stressed, you can feel it in your body and you could physically see that stress on you, the same way you would be able to see or identify symptoms of trauma on someone else or on yourself if you're going through the stage of denial. So when you kind of add the two together and you're denying and minimizing your trauma, whether it's through yourself or through other people that you've confided in, it keeps your sexual assault hidden. And yes, you don't have to broadcast your sexual assault to the whole world. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to speak on the details with anyone. But it's very important, I think, to be able to try therapy or speak to a professional who will be able to guide your thoughts and place you in a better mental state where you're not victimizing yourself, because it's very hard to move away from that thought where you're kind of victim shaming or like self-blaming, or seeing yourself as being at fault for what has happened. It's very difficult to get through that and see beyond that. What I was saying earlier about this embarrassment around sexual trauma, I think comes from conversations people have with one another when they think of what they would do in certain situations. But yeah, you go through this in everyday life, and in the topic of sexual assault, a lot of these conversations end up in, oh, I would be able to defend myself, I would be able to say no, I wouldn't let it happen to me. When you have those thoughts, it's very easy to say, because I can't lie, I probably used to be that person before I was molested. I used to think, yep, I'm a strong, independent woman, I'll so be able to defend myself. I don't get how it's so difficult to say no or like stop what's happening. And it's a very ignorant thought to have, but admittedly, I was probably one of those people, because you don't ever expect to be on the other side. You don't ever expect that one day you'll actually go through it yourself. And so when you do, there is this feeling of embarrassment of, damn, I thought I would be better than this, or I thought that I just thought that I wouldn't now be someone who has gone through sexual assault. And that feeling of shame and that feeling of embarrassment can really linger and can then direct other thoughts when it comes to self-blame and victimizing yourself and all these other emotions, which I'll go through later. But yeah, it's this shame of not being able to defend yourself, essentially. And it took a long time for me to realize, and it took therapy sessions for me to realize this, numerous therapy sessions before I realized this. But there's no shame in not stopping what has happened, because like I said, yes, it's very easy to say that you would act otherwise in that kind of situation, but when it's actually happening to you, you initially go through shock, and your body, the normal bodily reaction to shock is literally by freezing up and this feeling of being unable to move. And it doesn't then mean that you've allowed it to happen because you didn't move, or you didn't move his hand, or you didn't fight back. It's just that's how your body reacted to shock. And actually, when I was reading through other people's stories, when it came to rape, for example, or other more invasive experiences of sexual abuse, they would somehow feel guilty because obviously we can be an adult about this, but when your body is stimulated a certain way, especially for females, obviously, it's a normal reaction to get wet, or it's a normal reaction for your nipples to get hard because your body is being sexually stimulated. That does not mean that you found it pleasurable then. That doesn't mean that you have enjoyed someone raping you or someone molesting you. It's literally just how your body is wired to respond. And there's no shame in that. Like I said, it's literally a normal body reaction. And yes, it's a very difficult thought to move on from, but rather than placing that shame onto yourself, it should most definitely and only ever be placed onto the abuser. So I think if we really ingrain that thought into ourselves that actually I shouldn't be embarrassed for going through this because it's not something that I would ever want for myself. No one ever wants to be sexually abused. No one ever wants to then go through periods of depression and anxiety. And also we are far, like I mentioned in the beginning, we're far beyond our sexual trauma. This is why I don't like to use the word victim of sexual assault, because I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. I've survived something that is there to ultimately break me and to test me in a way that is beyond any sort of strength I had ever thought I had. A lot of survivors speak out on their abuse simply to show that there's more to us than just having our experience of sexual trauma. And it's also for a lot of people speak out on their abuse not for any form of gratification or a sense of healing. I think it's more to show other survivors who may be unable or feel that they're unable to vocalize their own experiences that, like I said, there's no shame in me sitting here saying that I've gone through sexual trauma. Because honestly, I think pretty much 99.9% of everyone in this world has gone through a form of sexual abuse. Some may not even recognize it as sexual abuse, but I'm pretty sure we've all been through some form of this experience of being violated. I think above all, there's this sense of blaming yourself, which comes into all the emotions I've just spoken about. There is this thought that you've somehow brought it onto yourself. And I know a lot of girls will go through this. Obviously, men will go through the same experience, but I'm speaking as a woman, that a lot of females will go through this and they'll think, I might have given off the impression that I liked him, or just somehow thinking that it's your fault. And this is why women are very cautious about doing stuff or like meeting up with either a man or a woman by themselves, because it might give off the wrong impression. And we're kind of programmed now to be so cautious around people and to be so cautious of how we dress and the way we speak. And so it's a lot easier to criticize yourself than it is to criticize others. You should never blame yourself for the way that you dress or how you've acted. Like, I was speaking about this with someone literally yesterday, and she was telling me about her experiences and how she would also be very cautious or think that, oh, well, maybe because I was his friend and like he would drop me off home, or, you know, you'd chill in the car together, or you'd chill outside together, or go cinema together, that maybe that gave off the wrong impression. But it's like, no, it should never give anyone the impression of violated. And there's then also this feeling of hopelessness, because I read about it in a lot of other people's experiences, and it's this feeling that you won't ever see beyond self-blame. You won't ever see beyond yourself as a victim. You won't ever see life beyond this depressive state that you might be in. And it comes from all these negative thoughts and all these negative emotions. And again, not being able to recognize or fully recognize your trauma, that you feel as though you're stuck in a certain state. And through therapy, through journaling, through just talking about your experiences, you'll find that it does get easier, and you might not notice the changes yourself, but I'm sure that your family, your friends, people will notice that you're a lot happier. People will notice that something has changed about you. Being a survivor of sexual trauma does not define you. People won't refer to you or look at you as just Valerie, a survivor of sexual assault, because I'm beyond that. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I will one day be a wife and one day be a mother, and I am a great friend, and I am hardworking, and I'm all these other things, and I have all these other qualities beyond me that overpower my sexual trauma. So last year, when I was at my absolute lowest point, and I was literally it felt like I was just walking around life, not really having a purpose, or not really feeling like I wanted to be here. There was one specific night where it kind of all turned around, I guess, and I felt like I had to force myself out of this state, because sometimes you do, in order for you to find help. I think it's a very difficult thing to ask for help when it comes to pride and ego and admitting that you're in need. But yeah, there was this one specific night. I hadn't told anyone. Literally the only person that knew was my best friend. So no one knew, no one in my family knew, and you could imagine it's a very difficult thing to keep to yourself, especially from your mum, and I woke up at 1 a.m. because for a very long time, I would always wake up at 1 a.m. for no reason. Well, not for no reason, but I would just, like clockwork, would wake up at 1 a.m. And I woke up one night just as normal, and I just remember feeling so tired and exhausted, and it was like, fuck, I'm awake again. Like, am I not going to ever get better? And my sister was sleeping in my room. I was just looking at her, like watching her sleep, and oh my god, am I gonna cry? But I remember thinking, like, she looks so peaceful in her sleep, and I'm never gonna get that same peace. I'm never going to sleep through the whole night. And I was just exhausted. And I had a journal at the time where I would write all my thoughts and write the nightmares and each flashback that I would have. And I started writing in that room. And when you cry, but you don't want anyone else to hear you cry, but it makes you want to cry even more. So I was in that state. I was literally sobbing in my bed, and I was like, okay, I really need to have one of those movie scene cries where you go up against the wall and slide down in slow motion. I need one of those. So I went into the toilet and I just started writing in the journal, and what I hadn't realised was I was actually starting to write a goodbye letter of some sort, because I was that hopeless. I started to think that, I don't like to use the word suicidal, because it's not that I was unhappy with my life or unhappy with my family, but I felt like the only way I could ever find peace was if I didn't have to live with my thoughts every day. And that was the only thought I had going on in my mind. And as I was writing this goodbye letter, I thought, what am I, my family is going to wake up tomorrow and see that I'm dead, basically. And they don't know what's happened to me. They don't understand why I've done this. And they're going to blame themselves, and they're going to go through all the emotions I've been going through. So when I had that thought, I was like, okay, I love my family, I love my friends, I have people who love me and will take care of me. And I know this isn't the end. There's so much that I want to do with my life. I want to have kids, I want to have my own family one day. Like, I didn't want it to just be this. I didn't want him to win, essentially, in the sense that he's broken me down to the point where I couldn't physically get myself up. And the very next morning, I started searching up loads of different charities, and started emailing them, calling them, and just wherever it is that I could find therapy or some kind of support group, I was contacting them, because I knew that I wanted to get help, and I knew that I wanted to get better, and I knew I could see myself beyond this. Whether it's through journaling, I find journaling really does help, because you're able to actually get all your thoughts out and see them, because sometimes if it's all just in your head, they can overlap and you start to confuse yourself, or some thoughts are going to be a lot louder than others. But when you have it all out on paper, it's just there. Start to write things like things you value about your life, things you value about yourself, and you'll find that will far outweigh the state that you're in right now. And hold on to that as tight as you possibly can, and use that to motivate yourself in finding help. Like I said, you can't begin to start your healing journey or your process if you don't acknowledge your pain first and foremost. And there's a lot of different things that you can do. It isn't just the kind of direct route of, okay, I need to find a therapist, because therapy is very expensive unless you're on the NHS waitlist, which even that can take up to a year before someone even contacts you. So there's other things beyond therapy as well. Of course, it is very helpful to go through like cognitive behavioural therapy and just normal talking therapy. But like I said, it can either be expensive or you're on a wait list for a very long time. So you can start by finding a safe place where you're able to fully express your thoughts. And like I said, it could be through journaling, or it could be just having a safe person that you can confide in. And by a safe place or a safe person, I mean somewhere where you won't feel like you need to be cautious about who you are and what you're doing and how you look. Somewhere where you're able to truly be vulnerable and not be scared for your vulnerability. And like I said, that can either just be through journaling or through someone else. There's also local groups. There's a lot of charities that do support groups. Most of them are just either volunteers or a group of survivors who have created a charity themselves, and you can just go and have support groups, or there's hotlines if you feel uncomfortable to be in a group and talk about it. So there's a lot out there when it comes to support. So I'll link some hotlines and stuff down below in the description box, and some other like charity groups. Don't think that there is just therapy or just like traditional medication like antidepressant pills and all these, which might help. But there's a lot of different forms, and it takes time before you can find, it may take time before you find a form of support that you're most comfortable with. But it's just being patient with yourself and also with other people around you in finding what you're comfortable with, and seeking help at your own pace. So it's not a rush to heal. You start by taking small steps that you're comfortable with. So it might just be Googling. I feel like I'm saying that so weird. Start by searching up a list of charities or hotlines and just write them down. Even if you don't call them or email them, just so you know that it's there, and you're able to see that there's so many people who are willing to help. That in itself is something that you should applaud yourself for, in terms of seeking help. And eventually You know, you'll be able to look back and truly recognize your progress and celebrate the fact that has now turned you into a person people can't belittle, because you've been through all that. You've been through criticizing yourself and shaming yourself and victimizing yourself. So once you go through all these hurdles, you'll find that you become such a strong person that people truly can't knock down. So yeah, that is all for today's podcast. As always, I hope that you've taken something away from this, whether you are a survivor yourself or if you're just someone who is curious or is watching this because they know a survivor and is trying to find a way to help them and advise them. I hope it has helped. And as I said, I will link or list a bunch of different hotlines in the description box. Thank you again for listening, and I shall see you all in the next episode. Bye.